Yeah. About the water. Well, yeah. Because that's what they consider basically their trade secret. They've said all along that's a trade secret. They've said that specifically about the water. Yeah. Well, about their consumption.
Seth?
About it because they think people can back engineer
Devin?
from that, and maybe it's possible.
Is he picking papers? Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
If they use that much water, you can figure it out.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, they're really paranoid about that. From the very beginning, they've always stated that that's essentially something that they've put out there available to the general public. So we've
I didn't date it. I just threw it together before I left.
No, because he was and it's kind of hard because Rogers.
So what are we putting this on the agenda?
She sat down where it was last time. I didn't look at the...
You want the higher chair?
Yeah, because say,
That's me
Is that you?
during urban renewal.
oh, okay.
Me and my low chair. You want this normal size chair?
Does
Are
it
you
go,
good?
does it go higher?
Yeah, this one's higher.
Sure.
The council is the contractor. Under our rules. Oh, I guess I should have looked. Kind of a court.
It doesn't matter.
Did you get the wrong chair or the mayor, the city manager? Yeah, because I don't remember that. This is way better. Thank you.
The chairs are all the same, aren't they?
Apparently not.
Some short people have them adjusted.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're in tall cotton right here, right?
Do you announce your award during
No.
council?
But I would.
We're going to start the meeting. Would you like to call the roll?
Russ Brown,
Present.
Ward Runyon,
Present.
Darcy Von Curtis,
Present.
Linda Miller, Mitchell McLaughlin.
Present.
Mayor Bates,
I'm here, President.
Mostly.
Okay, I will meet everybody in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's what a Boy Scout used to say.
What?
I believe we have one amendment to the agenda.
Staff is proposing to add, right before the discussion items, contract review board issue for an emergency purchase of a biosolids tanker truck for the wastewater treatment plant because ours met its demise and it's pretty bad shape. So we are proposing to add that to the agenda right before discussion items with your approval.
So that would be in between items 10 and 11.
Yes.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll make it, I'm sorry, go ahead, Linda.
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, presentations and proclamations. The Dalles Area Chamber of Commerce Quarterly Report.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. There's a lot going on in tourism.
Dave, could you introduce yourself and tell us your title?
Yeah, sorry about that. My name is Dave Nevins, and I'm the Director of Tourism for the Dalles under the Chamber of Commerce.
So yes, there's a lot of amazing things going on in tourism, and I'll share a few of my highlights in my second quarter packet, which looks like some of you have received. Hopefully you've looked it over. Media would be one of the first things I would share, and there's been a lot of media, actually about twice as much media as the last quarter. I can't promise that we'll double it each quarter, but we're on our way at least for now. I was impressed with the Alaska Beyond article. They really featured the Dalles. We were the feature, and I had requested copies for the city council. They did not arrive. So maybe we'll get them to you later, or at least, just know that it was good press for the Dalles. We do have coming up via magazine, which I spent some time with the author, the travel writer, and he was excellent. He really checked his facts out, was a great writer. He's done some really major, materials for other magazines and companies and stuff, websites. So we're looking forward to that. That should be out really soon, kind of waiting on that. And VIA has done really well for us in the past, so that should be a good one. Also, coming up, I am working with a popular travel writer for a March arrival, and we're looking at trying to push the off-season for the Dalles. And I've worked with her in the past. She's excellent, and planning her time out here, and she's looking at possibly getting into a couple different media options. So hopefully the story, or hopefully numerous stories, will be told in a number of different areas. And finally, under media, The Real News is doing a feature story once again. We, again, had the fortune of spending time with the travel writer, and I'm looking forward to an exceptional article. And we've been in touch with him before, working on different things. So this, The Real News will be featured at the Pacific Northwest Sportsmen Show in Portland, February 6th through the 10th, and we will be there representing the Dalles. And that publication will actually be a featured publication there, so that should be a real good highlight for us. And there are actually a couple of other writers and a blogger that I'm in touch with. I don't know if they'll get visits, but we're kind of going through the field of possibilities that can do well for the Dalles and feature us. So keep your eyes open and we'll see what happens. And touching base on the Sportsmen Show, I've heard numbers. I heard 10,000 people catch that show. It's the second largest show west of the Mississippi, and the largest show west of the Mississippi and the second largest in the country. So that's going to be our main feature this year, is to, hit the stage and promote. And we are going to open our booth up to members at no charge, so that they can come and help present themselves. So we'll kind of shuffle members in and out, and we'll probably have another key sponsor partnership in the booth with us as we're kind of working the details out. So that we know is going to be big because, of course, Portland is our main audience.
When are the dates for that?
February 6th through the 10th.
Thank you.
Yep. And looking at the packet demographics, I will just share some highlights. I supplied that in looking at our website, the age 25 to 34 is our most active group, and it's real important to kind of key on the right group. And that actually is different from our previous quarter, which was 35 to 44. So I don't know if it's a seasonal thing or just what, maybe calling that. We'll keep our eyes open as to, again, who to key on in the future, but that was a little bit surprising. And it also notes that on our website, the Dalles, of course, is #1 for our people searching our website. Not surprising there, but we're followed by Portland. I was a little bit surprised that the top city out of our state is San Francisco, which it wasn't Seattle, and it wasn't, Spokane or anywhere else. It actually was San Francisco, and I'm not sure quite what garnered that, but, you kind of kind of have to note that maybe there's a little extra interest or maybe some articles that were posted in the San Francisco area. Following in the tourism realm, we had many major events this year, which was exciting. And hopefully you caught just, pulling up the memory banks, the Travel Oregon mural, which was a real highlight for us. And then, of course, the mural celebration. And I think we really got a lot of media attention out of that. And we're continuing to kind of roll that forward because that was a really a great thing for us. And as you probably already know, we were one of only 7 cities to receive a mural. So a little love from Travel Oregon is not so bad. And then, of course, the U.S. Capitol Christmas tree, which, I don't know if you were there or not, but it was kind of a neat affair. It was different, and it was a nice kickoff to the holiday season. I wasn't quite ready to kick off Christmas at that point, but that was kind of on my calendar, and I think it worked out well. And I know I've been in touch with the director, and at that point she had shared that that was the best stop that they had had. It hadn't gone very far, but they'd had a number of stops before the Dalles, and of course I can't fess to the fact that, we were the best stop overall. I could make that up, but at least up to that point, she said that's the best stop they've had. So it really worked out well for us and them. And the Tourism Summit, maybe you heard about it, maybe you didn't, but that was just a local focus on tourism in the Dalles. It was at the Readiness Center, and I think a lot of people were impressed with our facility up there because we had a pretty good number of people from outside of the Dalles. So I think that, helped feature the Dalles, it helped feature the Readiness Center, and it, was just a good place to have a focus on tourism. And I think there was a lot of good conversation, and ideas continue to stream forth from that. A few goals of mine and the tourism team at the Chamber. Obviously, we want to have a thumbs-up, exceptional, engaging Sportsman Show. That's our focus right now. We're crazily getting ready for that since there's a lot of details involved with the Sportsman Show, but we're looking forward to it. And we are going to continue our free Saturday Explorer shuttle, which we did last year for the first year, and that was kind of an initiation by us and Gray Line and the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers. And we're looking at taking it on this year. And possibly it's going to run a little bit longer this year, so that's kind of a bonus. We're getting an earlier start than last year, so that will be good. And again, it's a free shuttle service from the Hood River to the Dalles. Looking at Saturday right now and, hoping maybe in the future, possibly we can expand it to Sunday if everything goes well. And the final point I have is the creation of the Dalles Historical Walking Tour brochure, which we are in the midst of. We actually secured funding through a nonprofit organization. We worked together on that funding, and I think it's going to be a neat brochure to focus on our history. And most of the work has already been done, so we just need to kind of craft the last final steps, and it's looking really sharp. So we're looking forward to that.
Great. Any questions for Dave?
I have a question.
Mark, Darcy?
So with the Sportsman Show coming up, and I know that Lisa's already familiar with this, but Oregon Fish and Wildlife is currently deciding what their plan is for the river because salmon and steelhead runs are low. And one of their top ideas would be to close all the fisheries up here in our area and let Portland fish. And so I'm just wondering, thinking about the Sportsman Show, have you thought about how that might impact what you normally do at the Sportsman Show? And then also what happens if Washington State, which operates separately, doesn't do the same thing over there? How does that impact? Because this is a big part of our tourism now. People come in and buy groceries and gas.
We've seen part of the effect, and Lisa's been a little more involved, but I mean, I actually had our top raffle prize giver from 2 years ago said, I can't give you anything this year because things are a little bit upside down. We don't know quite how it's going to flow, but I'm hearing it from the guides that they're concerned, and it's affecting their business and their anticipation of what's going to happen. So we're kind of I'm getting that effect, and I know Lisa could probably share a little more in depth as she goes to meetings and stuff like that as to what's going on and the effect that it can have overall. And we know that the salmon season was closed down early last year, right before fish camp, which is something that we're involved with, and we could kind of tell that it had an effect. Fish were still there, and they did fishing, and they caught fish, but without salmon, that's a keynote.
Do you want to share where our focus is this year so that we've shifted our focus a little bit so that we've kind of powwowed all as a staff and a team, where can we do, how can we do this? So we have really are emphasizing some of our outdoor recreation as far as cycling, hiking, and photography. We're having those exhibits and photography and all of those different things at our booth, along with having the cycling maps that are there. Then we're also working with the locations, different businesses in town. We're trying to emphasize our beer, our wine. We've got approval to have samplings at our booth. Nothing better than having free alcohol at your booth. It gets people in. So we're also doing that, but we're also taking Columbia Black Garlic. These are products. This is outdoor barbecuers, think barbecue. So we're trying to bring products to the Sportsman Show and having different people visit each day from the Dalles and representing their business. So we have a spot for a tasting, all of that. So those are some of the things that we're focusing on this year. The other piece on the fishing part is we still have walleye, we still have a lot of bass and trout, and so that's able, and then the sturgeon is catch and release. Right now, you can still catch and retain out on the pool right in front of the Dalles. So those are things that we're pushing as far as that outdoor recreation. And yes, I'm very active in the ODFNW, what's going on right there, and we will be putting out information to the entire community when those public hearings are being held, because I don't think they realize the impact of what they're doing, and not all of it, in my own personal opinion, not all of it makes sense. And so I understand low numbers, but I also see them, the way they're doing this could hurt our fishermen in the other types of fishing, and then not just the salmon, to where they're going to do the river and block it off. So we're very active on that and being there for all the meetings. It is quite the discussion and proposal. So I will be making sure all of you guys know when those public hearings are, so that hopefully some of our own city government can be there and help us and support us and be active in that too. So we are trying to highlight all the other amazing things we have for our community. So we're going to have fun. We're going to have food and alcohol in our booth. So come visit our booth in the up in Portland. But they're going to have a huge basket to raffle off, and we know that that works as a hook to get in. And then we've also got our information going out to them in a brochure that we give out. So our goal is another 2,000. As Dave has been initiated in helping to stuff those 2,000, and we're still not done. We've got to put gummy worms with them. So those are the things that we're doing to try to inform people. And I think the booth is probably going to be a pretty cool one this year. We've learned over the past few years what makes a really good booth and presentation. So we're pretty excited about that part. And they're all going to go do it. So I'm super excited. I get to just go attend on one of the days for fun. But it's pretty cool. The team is doing things and moving forward. So it is pretty cool to see that happen.
Any other questions for the chamber? On page, you did mention the walking brochure. It says funding has been secured. How did you get the funding?
We applied. Actually, it was through the original courthouse, and we applied with the Oregon Community Foundation and their Historic Trails Fund.
Thanks.
Yep.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Next, we have another quarterly report, this time from Blue Zones.
Good evening. My name is Leticia Valle. I'm the Community Program Manager for the Blue Zones Project, The Dalles. Honorable Mayor, thank you for having us. City Council members and staff, we're happy to be here.
And I'm Taylor Smith, Project Manager with Blue Zones Project in the Dalles.
Okay, so we've gotten a quarterly report, and I'm happy to see some regular faces as we've been transitioning this work, and some new faces as well. So feel free to ask questions at any time. We want to thank Cambria Health Foundation and all of our local sponsors. And just briefly, I want to highlight that we have Northern Wasco County School District 21 as one of our newer funders. If you saw in an article that came out last Wednesday, Blue Zones Project still has a $192,000 gap in funding for phase 1, but the school district came through with $5,000, which we greatly appreciate. And Candy Armstrong, a special thank you to her, who said she wanted to make sure that the school district was showing that they had skin in the game. Big thank you also to Mimi McDonald and Lauren Kramer, who continued to work on fundraising efforts, as well as about 8 other individuals that are meeting very frequently.
And despite those funding challenges that we are facing, it's just work as normal. We're moving ahead. Most of you know that we do work at the people, places, and policy level, and so we'll be kind of reporting on all of those different levels. So for overall engagement, we have metric pillars. We were to engage 1,639 individuals, or 15% of our population 15 and over. And at the end of December, we were at 1,820. So that's 111% of our program goal that we were supposed to meet in April of 2020. So we're way ahead of schedule, and just really pleased with all the support that we've had from the community of the Dalles and the people that are kind of behind this work, and hoping to keep seeing healthy choices become easier.
Purpose workshops. So one of the things that we're focusing on all over the nation, there's been a drop in the reason people being able to articulate why they get up in the morning. So what is your purpose for waking up? What is your task in life? And so we have had great interest from community members about hosting these purpose workshops. They're about 2-hour purpose workshops. And I want to highlight Orchard View Farms, who just recently had me train about 40 of their Spanish-speaking leaders. And it's just showing that our work sites, local work sites, are really trying to institutionalize this culture change and helping their workers identify their sense of purpose, and then we can highlight their passions and their strengths so that they can apply those in their home and their community. So I wanted to report back that purpose workshops have been extremely successful, and if anybody's interested, get a hold of us, and we're glad to host some more for your organizations.
And moving on to places, one of the places that we work in is restaurants, and our goal for the project was to approve 4 different restaurants in the Dalles, so 10% of the restaurants that we have here. You can see that we have met our 4, so the Riv, Montira's, Atrium Falls, and the Bistro at Water's Edge are all Blue Zones approved. And our ask of you is just that if you go in there, and if you have one of the Blue Zones options, we'd love for you to give them some positive feedback that you appreciate having those options, or if you have a favorite restaurant that doesn't have healthy offerings yet, encourage them to contact us and take that next step in making healthy choices easier everywhere that we spend our time. Work sites are another place that we're working in. This only shows 5, but as of this month, we have 2 additional, so North Central Public Health District and North Wasco County PUD are also approved as well. So that brings us to a total of 7 work sites out of the 10 that we're required to meet for that metric. So we're really excited that these work sites are coming on board. If you've ever seen the worksite pledge, it's not a small packet. So it is a long list of different options that these work sites can choose to accumulate the number of points that's required for approval. So we're just really excited that 7 out of the 10 required have hopped on board to make those changes for their employees and workplace well-being. Yet another place, grocery stores, and we're also piloting a corner store program that we're working with Blue Zones National on, so that's kind of a newer model that's rolling out. The Dalles does have a higher concentration of convenience stores in our community, So a lot of people use corner stores to purchase their groceries, so it's important that there are healthy options available there as well as at the traditional grocery stores. So we've worked with Grocery Outlet. You may have seen the healthy checkout lanes and some other new implementations there. And they are not quite approved yet, but again, we would love it if you go in there. You can give some positive feedback about the changes and how you appreciate those, and just kind of encourage them to push it across the finish line. They're really close, so we'd love any kind of positive feedback that you can encourage. And schools. So we have to have at least 50% of public schools becoming Blue Zones project approved. We are engaged with several of the schools, and they're not approved yet, but most recently we've had the Healthy Celebrations cart roll out at Chenoweth Elementary. I'm not sure if anyone had a chance to see that, but it basically replaces parents bringing in cookies, cupcakes, things like that to celebrate birthdays every time that a student has a birthday in the classroom. So there's one monthly celebration. The smoothie cart comes in and the kids get this binder of different smoothies. They get to pick out the one that they want, and they have the celebration all at one time. We had a lot of really positive feedback, and the kids seemed to really enjoy it. They tried different fruits and vegetables, and the teachers really like it too because it cuts down on interruptions on class time with having that celebration just one time a month. So we're really excited to see how that progresses, and we've had some other schools request that as well. Yeah, and the other great thing about the Healthy Celebrations Kit is that if parents can't maybe afford to go out and buy treats for the classroom, or they don't have time to make them at home, this kind of makes it a level playing field so that everybody gets to be a part of the celebration. And one more piece about schools. Hopefully, if you're awake early enough, you've seen the walking school bus on Wednesday morning. So that's happening at every elementary school in the Dalles, as well as St. Mary's, which is outside of the public school district, but participating as well. We've had about 30 regular volunteers that are showing up every Wednesday morning to walk those kids to school at 7 a.m. We've had between 75 to 100 kids at all 4 schools total participating every week. It's a great way for the kids to get some physical activity, and even though it's really early, the volunteers, once they're there and kind of have the energy of the kids to fuel them, it's pretty contagious. And we are looking for a few more volunteers. We have some spots at some schools where there's only 1 volunteer a week, and we would like to get that to the point where there's 2 at every school every week, just in case anything happens. So if you or anyone you know would be interested in volunteering, please reach out to us, and we'd love to connect you with a spot at one of the schools where we need an extra person.
Great, so we've talked about people, places, and policy. And in order to become a Blue Zone certified community, we have to pass 9 built environment policies, and that includes also 1 marquee project. And we have to pass 5 food policies and 3 tobacco policies. So I'll get into a little bit more detail. You have this information in your packet. For built environment, we've got a lot of partnerships with other organizations. I think our closest, our Safe Out to School master plan is where we're working the closest with the city. And the Dry Hollow Marquee project was kind of a demonstration of how we're able to collaborate with neighbors, schools, city, volunteers, and parents and students. Seeking sustainable funding for equitable access to physical activity was something that we had identified, and we have completed that, and that looks like a contract between Pacific Source and Northern Wasco Parks and Rec District. So if a child who is on Medicaid or OHP at his doctor they're asked if they're receiving 60 minutes of exercise a day. If the parent says no, they get a prescription to the pool. So Pacific Source will pay for the prescription for the whole family for a swim pass. And we basically identified that a kindergartner can't take themselves to the pool, so we need to make it equitable for their entire family. And I think within the first 2 weeks, there was about 44 vouchers that were given out. So it's a good business model for our pools department, and a big win to try to increase physical activity amongst our kids, since we're trying to impact and make a change in BMI for our students. Again, about 40% of our elementary school kids are obese currently, so we're making really focused efforts on how we can make those changes. The Parks Master Plan, we hope to have that with Scott Baker by this spring. And we're looking forward to working with new council members and also whenever there's new city staff to get people up to speed on what complete streets looks like, welcoming streets where people can gather and feel safe and actually walk. So we recognize that paving a sidewalk doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to use it. So how do we create these safe spaces so we're all walking more? Our Marquee project at Dry Hollow is complete, and there's some semi-permanent and some permanent changes that are happening up there, and I'd love to hear feedback on how you think it's going, but I've gotten reports back from city staff that things are much safer up there, which we're happy to hear. Mill Creek Greenway, our second marquee, we're about 75% on track, and local partners are coming together to make sure that, the First Street scaping is also aligning with the Mill Creek Trail, and just really getting everyone to collaborate as their projects line up to each other. Food goals, the one we've been working on with the city is the mobile food vendor policy, where we're incentivizing, the city is incentivizing mobile food carts to offer at least one healthy menu item. And that's also a collaboration with North Central Public Health District, who would come in and inspect. So in order to not add more work to city staff, North Central Public Health Department would make sure that they're offering that healthy menu item, and then that would incentivize them. And by incentivize, we're thinking about waiving the fee for them. So it's $25 for every 6 months or $50 for a year for their permit. So that's very exciting. I'll move to tobacco and smoke. So we need to pass 3 policies within, we've been doing this for a year and a half, so by the end of this year. And this is where I really need your help at City Council. There's some really good examples of things that we can do right away, set some policies that we know from research, just putting signage up will help enforce it. So self-enforcing policies such as a smoke-free park at Lewis and Clark. It's the last park that needs to be smoke-free, tobacco-free. Also working with the city to update signs. So current tobacco-free campus signs would also include marijuana, e-vaping, chew. So that's something that we want to work on. Another one that we think is an easy one is increasing the minimum distance from smoking from entryways to at least 25 feet. So currently Oregon law is 10 feet. So if we could just increase that to 25 feet, that would be a great win. And tobacco retail. So I'm channeling Haley from the health department. She says you need a permit to sell a snow cone, but you don't need a permit to sell tobacco. So thinking about that and how we try to make it more difficult for our students to buy tobacco or e-cigarettes, which is a trend, maybe establishing a tobacco retail license where you can't sell tobacco within 1,000 or 2,000 feet from where students gather. And the research that we did, currently the only market that would fall within that 1,000 feet from where students gather is Center Mart by the fields. So right now that there aren't that many places selling tobacco close to where people and students gather would be the time to do it and try to keep that out. So this is the overall certification status. As you can see, we've met our individual engagement pillar. We're at 70% of work sites. Grocery outlet is in progress. Restaurants we're at 100%. Schools is in progress. Walking school bus we've met and completed. Community policy still in progress, and our marquee is at 100%. Just want to thank all of the people who have participated in any of our committees. It's really a great feeling when we've got this many leaders working together to try to get blue zones approved, and the City of the Dalles that recognition for making healthy changes and healthy options easier. Lastly, I just wanted to report that Taylor and I were visiting with Walla Walla last week. So they are applying to be the first Blue Zones project community in Washington. And they wanted to talk to us about what it's like to actually be working on the ground. And we had a few comments from people that they were going to move here because they're so excited about what the DAOs is doing. And they feel like we're way ahead of them. But anyway, I wanted to share that feedback that they're really looking to the DAOs as an example. We're very similar communities. They're much larger, but are excited for the partnership, and we're only 3 hours away. And then just again to mention that I'm so impressed with Orchard View and a workplace that's just going above and beyond what they need to do to help make their workplace welcoming and really prepare their workers. Many of them are excited about, GED classes and learning about how to invest their monies, and Orchard View is providing these purpose workshops while they're getting paid and developing leadership skills, and also just growing up in the gorge and meeting these people that work at Orchard View that, helped start the Mexican Rodeo Association in the 80s here, and I grew up with my dad doing that. And so it's really neat to connect with them again on a different level and see, what's happened with their lives in the last 20 years and being a part of helping them figure out how they can help support their community. Anything else, Taylor? Any questions for us?
Any questions? Right.
Dry Hollow and the cones, are there more or less cones or the same amount as last year? And how's that working?
I'm looking at Dale.
It's pretty similar to what was up there last fall, or last spring, when we did the Marquee trial period. Like right now, the cones are going to remain in place throughout the school year to keep it working the way it was. From the feedback that we've gotten from a lot of the parents in the school itself, and that it's working much better.
And I do believe the school district was waiting to receive certain funds from the enterprise zone to make those permanent changes. So we'll have cones until it can become permanent.
Comments from the neighbors compared to last year?
Yeah, I think initially we did get some pushback, but we had several meetings where we talked to the neighbors and kind of brought them into the process. And I think when we had our final public meeting held at the school, there were some people who were initially opposed who were just really appreciative that they were able to sit down with all of the different people involved in the project and have a conversation and feel like they had a voice in the change that was happening. So I think it got off to a little bit of a rocky start. It was kind of a quick process that we had to get through, but by the end, I think we kind of established a new way of doing things where everybody felt like they were involved in a big change that was happening.
Very good, thank you.
Anybody else?
I guess we could point out that the Dry Hollow pop-up was such a success that we're actually looking at doing something similar out at Chenoweth Elementary this spring as well. And doing some trial things out there for the issues that they're encountering on Chenoweth Road and their parking lot.
I just want to make sure that we all have the same information, especially since a couple of us are new, so I want to ask you about your funding situation. As I understand, if I say something that's incorrect, please correct me.
Sure.
You appeared before the Budget Committee last year in May and asked for $50,000.
Yes.
And there was a lot of debate about it, and you withdrew your request, right? Because you didn't want to compete with Main Street for the funding.
You're correct, yes. So there was the fireworks show, Blue Zones Project and Main Street asking for some additional funds. And the first decision was made on the fireworks. So the fireworks was funded, and then the rest of the money would have been split, or it would have been Blue Zones or Main Street, but Main Street is one of our partners, and so that's why we withdrew.
Okay. And then about 2 or 3 months ago, you came before the City Council and requested $50,000, is that?
Yes, we asked for it out of cycle because we had been told that we needed to find out by the end of January if there was any potential funds, and we're still waiting to hear back about that deadline. By the Oregon Business Council and Cambia Health Foundation, who funds 2/3 of the project.
Okay. Okay, and then if I recall, that was a tie vote, and then was it a 3-2 vote to deny the funding? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And are you planning on coming back before the council, before the budget committee next fiscal year, or have you made up your mind whether you want to ask for the funding before the fiscal year begins?
Well, yeah, I think Julie will mention it in her report, but we are still asking the city, and now that we understand the budget process for the city, we are asking early in the year so that we can be included in the budget when it's approved in May. What we had asked the Canby Health Foundation is to extend our deadline until August so that we could make sure that when you approve your budget, we do have those funds. So right now, I don't want to ask to go out of cycle as long as it's okay with the Oregon Business Council, and they know that it's on the budget agenda.
No, I already have the request in my budget plan.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Yeah, lastly, I want to invite you because we're putting together a food policy summit on March 6th, and it's going to be a lot of decision makers and medical experts that are going to learn about, how food affects our health. So you're all invited to participate as policymakers. We know you've got the power to make some big changes, so we'd appreciate for you to be there. Thank you.
Was that in our packet?
No, I'll pass this out now.
Oh, great, thanks.
You said March 6th?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is audience participation. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred to the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the city council? Please identify yourself with your address.
I didn't come in here planning to do this. I'm Carolyn Wood, 1709 Liberty Way, planning to do this, but it just dawned on me that I hadn't heard anything about the subject of the murals. I believe that about a year ago, you put some money in the budget for some maintenance on the murals, and I don't, to my knowledge, nothing has been done. I believe that FD4 took over the Mural Society. Mural Society was a membership organization. They didn't take over, they merged. Well, right. They took on the Mural Society. The Mural Society doesn't exist separate from them. They're the Mural Society. And and I thought that, my understanding was they were the ones that were going to get the money to do some maintenance work on the murals. I haven't seen anything done. My question is, does anybody else know if they are intending to? They were a membership organization. I was a member, but have never heard anything from them. I feel very strongly that we should not let the murals deteriorate, and some of them need attention, and we have lost one. My understanding is that they would be welcomed back, but it's going to take a considerable amount of money to recreate it. It's been a while since I looked at these figures, but the investment was and the value of those murals is it's someplace between $100,000 and $200,000. And it behooves us to maintain those. I think they're a significant piece of the historical interest of this city. They always get a lot of comments whenever I've done tours of them. So my concern, I'm expressing my concern, and I think since we haven't seen anything happen in the last year, because there was money made available, somebody needs to light a fire under somebody, whoever has that responsibility. And if they're not going to, then we need to find some other way to do it if they're going to forget that responsibility. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Is there anybody, before you leave, anybody here that can address her concerns? Yes. our city manager.
I can't address them all tonight, but you are correct. No money has been requested for that, and I actually haven't had any communication with them, so I will follow up on this if that's okay with the city council and report back what I find.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's no money in the budget?
There
There
was
is.
money in the budget, but they haven't requested it to do anything with it.
How much, do you know how much is in there? Anybody know?
Was it 5?
25,000, I thought.
I thought it was 35.
35, something like that.
Okay.
I don't think it was that high, but I'll look
We'll get
into
back with you.
it.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to address the council from the audience? Okay. City manager's report.
Oh, good. I have some good news for you. I have a couple of report little items too, but if you will indulge me, I would like to ask Brianna to come up. She's going to take 1 minute of my city manager report to deliver the awesome news. You're going to be so excited.
Thank you, Julie. Honorable Mayor and council members, I'm Brianna Wimber from the Stratton Agency. We're your workers' compensation insurance agent for Safe Corp. Today, I made my way to the city to deliver some good news, as Julie said. Due to the great collaboration between the city council members, the department directors, HR, your guys' new safety officer, the Safe Corporation, and myself, your 2009 mod factor for your workers' compensation has dropped down to 0.98. So that is amazing. 1.0 is flat and average for the type of entity. So to drop below that just means that you guys have all done an exceptional job. Last year it was 1.03, so we were close. We were still really good. I was looking back. In just 2016, we were at a 1.69, which is not good. So coming from 1.69 to 0.98 is amazing. So I just wanted to say congratulations. It's amazing. All the hard work is paid off.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we get free workers' comp coverage?
free. Wishful thinking.
Maybe Julie could, or you could tell us why we improved so much.
I would attribute a lot of that to the council's diligence in setting aside those safety funds for only, or dividend returns only for safety purposes. And we've worked very, very hard to make sure those monies were well spent and tons of training. And I just think it's the council who finally realized what was going on and said, no, stop, and we really turned that train around.
Yeah, it's a whole culture.
Everyone's
It
worked
trickles
hard.
down. I mean, the decisions start here, and like I said, when I listed off the department directors and safety managers, it takes a team to make that happen, and, it's just good to see that, the workforce's, health and safety is a #1 priority, and that's why it shows, because it's taken seriously throughout the whole chain. So.
Is our safety officer, is that a fairly new position?
Yes, that is new.
We got to give some credit to the people that work in the field.
Absolutely.
And the police department and public works.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's everyone,
absolutely.
and everyone has taken on that culture. Even, we have an executive risk management team that also meets once a month. So it's every level, that's our #1 thing. Even, like, I'm sure you do that at Public Works too, at City Hall, when we have our monthly meeting, the first thing we do is have a safety topic. So it's spread to every corner of the city.
The most important thing is that everyone is safe.
Yep.
But it also adds dollars to our budget.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everybody goes home at night and goes to see their family.
That's the important thing.
You got it.
That's the important thing.
So,
And our safety officer is supervised by our human resources?
Correct.
Is that right? Good job.
Yes. Good
Okay.
supervising.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brianna. Then just a couple things, Dave sent me some little, we call them blurbs, a couple of good information things for you. We received notice of award of a $175,000 renewable energy development grant from the Department of Energy, and that is related to our cogen work at the wastewater treatment plant that we've been doing. So that grant brings the total of outside funding to $675,000 when you add that into the $500,000 from DEQ that we received. So that was a lot of grant funding for that project. And then last week, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project received a grand award from the American Council of Engineering Companies in Oregon. This is one of the 5 highest awards given from 27 projects that were nominated. And the award was, of course, based on the scope of projects and efficiencies realized throughout the project, and it was the first major water or wastewater project in Oregon where we did the progressive design contract. And in fact, kudos to Dave, because we're famous now for that work and the success of that project, and Dave actually gets asked to speak about it quite often to other communities. And the city's project has been nominated for consideration on the national level, so we might even do better. And then one piece of not so happy news. We were unsuccessful in getting our Safe Routes to School grant that we applied for that permanent dry hollow fixes. There was 112 applications for funding totaling $85 million, which competed for only $16 million that were available. So they did award 24 projects, and then we just weren't one of them, and then we can apply again for 2020 for that project or Chenoweth. And let me make sure that's all I have. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Julie. City Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. A couple of land use cases I want to talk with the council about. I think you'll recall that we had the case involving the property on East 9th Street where Luba ruled for the city, and Mrs. Hunt filed an appeal with the Court of Appeals. Her brief was actually filed last week, but I just got the brief today, and I had a chance to look at it initially. The response will be due February 13th, so I'll be working on that to get that in time. It turns out there won't be any oral arguments since Mrs. Hunt is not an attorney. The court just actually accepts the briefs and rules on the briefs. So I will be focusing real hard to try to point out why I think her view of the situation is not correct and that the decision should be affirmed. Today was the day for the brief on the other Luba case involving the property of 13th and Perkins. I did not receive it, but I anticipate that it should be coming today or so. Mrs. Hunt has an attorney on that case, so I probably will be getting that. Our response on that will be due shortly after the one for the Court of Appeals, so I'll be pretty busy with those 2 briefs, but we'll carry on. And I want to let the council know, too, on the 11th of February, I asked for an item on the Girl Scout house to have the council determine whether you want to declare that surplus and then whether you want to consider donating it possibly to Columbia Cascade Housing, I believe it is, Joel Manson's group, or to sell the property. But we want to at least move that process ahead to declare it surplus, and then we can proceed with that. So you'll be looking at that on the 11th.
Thank you. City Council reports. Start with Tim.
All right. As acting mayor pro tem, I attended the recent board meeting at Mid-Columbia Regional Airport Commission, where the board listened to 2 requests to develop land adjacent to the airport. No action was taken. A discussion was to follow between the 2 developers on how to move forward. I was optimistic and optimistically pleased with the tone of the 2 parties, so I think some positive things came out of that meeting. On Thursday, January 24th, I, along with Councilman Runyon, attended the League of Oregon Cities workshop that focused on current legislative action that's before the Oregon lawmaking body. Governor Kate Brown, along with the leaders from both the House and Senate, provided insight into the direction of the Congress and answered questions related to the budget. Later, a panel representing the views of LOC, League of Oregon Cities, on how the pending action would affect cities across the state. We then visited the Capitol and met with representatives from both the Senate and House of Representatives. I found the workshop to be very informative and very relevant. I attended the Blue Zone meeting today that was scheduled, and as a representative of the city. And I have a couple of questions that I'm going to incorporate, and one is for you, Mr. Anderson, and that is the left turn into Cherry Heights on 2nd, and from Cherry Heights to 2nd, turning left, that corner, I've been receiving concerns and complaints from our citizens about the increased traffic over the years because of growth and development in that corner. And I did stop by the police department, and I got some traffic, basically some data on incidents that have occurred on that corner. And what I'm getting from the reports is that many or most of them actually are caused by the turns and also the speed of the approaching ramp, off-ramp coming off the freeway. So, and there's some blind spot that's in there. The approach is too narrow. So, we had talked about perhaps looking at the possibility of installing traffic control lighting, and you were going to look into that. Have you made any progress?
So we reached out to the consultants that worked with us last time to update our transportation system plan. They're developing a cost estimate for us to just go in and do an evaluation of that single intersection. And then from that, we'll be able to develop what might be most cost-effective options to make some improvements and, perhaps draft an amendment that could be adopted to the transportation system plan and identify a project in that area. So I don't think haven't got that cost estimate back from them yet as far as doing an evaluation of the intersection. So,
We got a response, but we still waiting for the number.
The number, yeah.
All right, so we are moving forward.
Yes.
All right, and then I'll just ask Councilman Brown to keep that on the docket at Safety Committee.
I think we had a conversation about it at the last meeting, if I remember correctly.
Good. So, thank you very much. Mr. Harris, this one's for you. The construction that's underway on the corner of 10th and Mount Hood, it's a fourplex, I believe. It's a new construction on the very corner. The concern was that there was no, that all of it would be off-street parking and no parking in the complex itself. But now that I've gone down the alleyway, I do see that there are garages. So what is the rule about, multi-complex like this is, and the parking? Is it one per unit?
It depends on the size of the complex, but generally for the smaller sizes, yes, one parking space per unit.
My other follow-up question then is, people were asking me, and I in turn couldn't answer that, so I waited until you returned to ask you. However, I think it's part of educating the public in how can they find this information out themselves if they wanted to go in and look at the ordinances.
Well, those are available on the city's website, on the planning department's page, the zoning ordinance, chapter 10, I believe.
Municipal code.
Good. I knew the answer to that question, but I just wanted it stated for the public so that they know how they can go in and find the answers to those questions that they're asking all of us. And thank you, Brianna, for the thoughtfulness. Appreciate it. That's all of my report.
Thank you. Linda?
Okay, on the 15th, I attended the urban renewal meeting, and we had an executive session that, which can't be discussed here, but there is an ENA exclusive negotiating agreement going on with Mary Hanlon for the property at the old Griffith Motors property. And there was purchase agreement for the recreation building. I also attended a Dallas Sister City meeting last Thursday, and I'm really impressed with the new group of young people that are taking on the presidency and the other offices. They're really digging in and finding out what needs to be done and the protocol for a board. And that makes me feel good because it wasn't there in the past. So, and they're making plans for our student delegation going to Japan. So, that's my report.
Mayor Mays, I need to add an addendum. I did attend that urban development meeting as well,
Yes, you did.
as required by your directive.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. Darcy?
Okay, so I also attended the urban renewal meeting, and Linda's correct, but just to clarify that it's not the land itself for the Hanlon project, it's actually for what she wants to build on the project, so she's already
Right.
worked out with Griffith and purchased the property. And then things going on, we finally have some movement on not only the recreation building, but there's also some hope for the blue building as well, so I know we're all looking forward to that. I wanted to thank Carolyn Wood for bringing up the murals issue because that had slipped off my radar that we hadn't heard anything. I guess I just assumed once we told people we'd give them money, they'd want to come get it. I did attend the library board meeting unofficially, not as a representative of the city, but just to kind of stay in tune with what's going on since the library is basically a part of the city. And so unofficially, not as a city council member, but this came up because I was talking with the chamber about what they were doing for tourism around the fishing. I was invited to go to the CCA meeting, which is the Coastal Conservation Association. And if you don't know anything about them, they're a science-based advocacy group here locally and throughout the state. They advocate for salmon, steelhead, and other Northwest marine fish species. And the reason that I went is they had a presentation from ODFW about what they were thinking about. And honestly, I had heard about it. My husband's a fisherman. He was planning to go, and he reminded me that it's not just about whether or not you fish, it's about the economics of the city. And so maybe that's obvious to everyone, but I sort of slipped on that one. So I just want to mention it to everyone because when Lisa sends out the invitation to participate, it's really important. There's a lot more people in Portland and they're going to be a lot louder. And it really is important if you care about the economy, whether you personally care about whether you go fish, to speak up and say something, whether you send a written comment or not. I think this could have a huge impact on our economy here because of all the gas and groceries and things that normally get purchased and we might forget about that. So that's my report.
Thank you. Rod?
Since our last meeting, I did also attend the airport board meeting just to observe and see what was going on over there and make some notes. Had the same impression that Councilman McLaughlin had. I think there's some positive things afoot. I also attended at the Senior Center, and our city manager, Julie Kruger, was there as well. The Ford Foundation was involved in a Visions for Wasco County meeting. Also attended the ribbon cutting for Cherry City Catering, which just opened down the street. It's Carol Malcolm, once again in the space where she used to be. And then on the 24th, then I brought presents as I chauffeured Councilman McLaughlin to Salem. I brought back things, which I'm going to give you some, and I'm going to pass the rest around. Nothing for you, Gene.
That's okay.
Top book is yours.
You can have mine, Gene.
Yeah. And one of those is for you.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm getting some of it. And that.
Thank you.
And for Linda.
Thank you, sir.
You already have all this stuff, so we're okay there. And I brought you a pen.
Oh, I have some stuff to show you.
So, even though you were unable to attend due to various schedules and whatnot, it's a very worthwhile thing. I took Tim on a tour of both the House and the Senate offices in the Capitol, and Mayor Ewing of Maupin joined us, and we made a lot of contacts there and whatnot. These cards that you have were put together by each of the individual lobbyists. If you look at the top of it, the white one is kind of an overview. but the others are all color-coded, and what this green one is on broadband, blue one is on energy, environment, and water, and so on. Each one has an emphasis on it. On the back of the white one, all the lobbyists that work for LOC for the areas you might be specifically interested in are listed, email and phone numbers, and they want you to call them. And it's very important. They've listed a lot of the bills that they are watching. Just because it's on the card doesn't mean they're for it or against it. You need to read the material above, but you can also call them and see where they really stand. These all came about from committees around the state, and maybe some of you participated in those, I don't know. But that's how this list was built. So they're working on behalf of the city of the Dalles, and they want your input. So feel free to give them a call and ask. Okay.
Is that it?
That's it.
Thank you. Russ?
I don't have much to report, but I wonder if either of our representatives that went to Salem, I've got one, thanks.
Oh, I already did. You want to?
No. Funny. If either of our representatives ask anybody about what the state is going to do regarding the homeless problem.
There's one of these on housing.
Yeah, that's not really the whole homeless problem.
It is a huge...
Homeless is kind of a misnomer.
What they're going to do is right now, 1,500 bills on all kinds of subjects were dropped in 1 week. That doesn't mean they were dropped into a can. It means they were dropped into different committees. And housing is a #1 priority. So there's lots to be done, lots to look at, but nothing has been done as yet. They're just now going through it. That's why the 241 communities that make up the state of Oregon need to participate. It was interesting, Tim thought this was a little funny as well. When the governor got up to speak, she wanted to thank the Salem City Council, and the lights were kind of in her eyes, and she's saying, and where are they at? No one from Salem City Council was at the convention center. So, anyway, the process has just begun. Now's the time to start asking those questions directly of our representatives and those that are not our representatives.
Actually,
all sides of the table, actually the best thing to do.
Kate Brown did address that in her presentation.
Yeah.
And homelessness was on the top, one of the issues on the top of her list. And also LOC, it was on the top of their list. And the buzz around, when you listen, you network with other cities and other government officials, and that was also a buzz that was going on, is the increased homelessness around the state and the nation. So it is a priority.
Okay, thanks.
As far as LOC, on the white one that kind of listed everything at a broad glance, it's listed as the #3 issue there, but the topic was definitely a #1 issue around all the tables.
Another thing was the forest fuel problem or issue is getting access to the forest to take away some of that fuel that lies on that is a hotly contested political. However, what I took back was that she is looking and working with Forest Department, other people from throughout the state to get representation so that issue can be fairly looked at and the best plan put in place to prevent fires from happening like we've suffered for the last couple of years in our area and around the state. So that is another point that's being addressed.
They always talk about it when we've had fires, but nobody ever does anything.
Yeah, it's true.
Exactly.
And one other thing that you mentioned about the parking at 10th and Mount Hood, I'll be arm wrestling with Mr. Harris sometime this week, I suspect, to argue for more off-street parking rather than less in multifamily developments.
That would be an ordinance change.
He wants to change it to lessen the number of parking places, not make them more. We'll be having my understanding is from Dawn that we'll be having a conversation later this week. Am I correct in that assumption?
We'll be having a...
Or has she shared that with you?
Anything else, Russ?
No.
That's
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was reminded that we have 2 people here who won awards at the Chamber banquet. We have Man of the Year, Timothy McLaughlin, and I believe Volunteer of the Year, is that correct? Corliss Marsh.
Yes.
Thanks, Darcy, you just stole half my report.
Sorry, I was afraid since you were gone, you didn't know.
I wasn't there, so it's fine. Thanks, sir, I was gone for 10 days on our family business, and I'd like to express my appreciation to Tim for filling in for me. I just want to also mention that city council members and staff, please reserve Saturday, March 30th for our council retreat goal setting session, one day. We're looking at around 9 to 3, and our city clerk, our city manager, and I have met, and I'll be talking with a possible facilitator this week and hopefully get them on board. So again, Saturday, March 30th. The only other thing I had was we've been contacted by the Mid-Columbia Economic Development District for someone to represent the city at their Transportation Administrative Board meeting coming up on February 11th. I plan on going, but if somebody would like to be the city representative to that committee, please let me know. You don't have to do it now, just let me know after the meeting. I'll be happy to step down and let you take my place.
And they only meet quarterly, so
And they
it's
only
not
meet quarterly.
a huge time commitment.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action items section. There are 2 items on the consent agenda. One is the approval of the minutes of January 14th, and 2 is a resolution concurring with my appointment to the Urban Renewal Agency, Gary Grossman, and to the city's budget committee, Tanner Elliott. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have the special item that was added to the agenda tonight on the recommendation and request from staff to purchase a sludge truck.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, and I'm going to try really hard to avoid using the word sludge. I've got it crossed out and written biosolids all the way through my report, so.
There's probably worse words to describe it.
Yeah, there probably are. The city purchased a new new biosolids truck in 2014, and at that time, we relegated the old truck to the role of a backup vehicle. Recently, as our biosolids volumes have increased, we found ourselves having to use both trucks concurrently to haul the volumes that are involved. The old truck's broken down. We put about $18,000 into some engine repairs on it 7 months ago. We've gotten an estimate now for the repairs that it currently needs, and they're over $36,000. The frame on the truck has been broken a number of times and been re-welded. It doesn't seem to make sense to us to continue to put money into this truck that's worn out. Looked through the market for used vehicles. There are not a lot of tanker trucks available, but we did find one that we think will work pretty well for us. It's a 2005 Freightliner with 26,000 miles on it, has a 3,000-gallon tank. It's located in George, Washington at Erickson Tank and Pump, which is a vendor that we've worked with a number of times before. The cost of that truck would be $68,500. He's actually offering to add some things to it that it doesn't currently have that we would need. We have provided some information on the other trucks we were able to find. 2 of them are on the West Coast and range from $79,900 to $189,500. The $79,000 one has 324,000 miles on it, so it's a pretty well-worn truck. We have the funds within the budget that could be used for this purchase in Fund 9, which is our Public Works Reserve Fund. We've been banking money in that fund for the future replacement of our Aquatech vacuum truck. We currently have $450,000 in that line code for that future purchase, so staff would propose that we use the $68,500 of that $450,000 for this emergency purchase. With that, staff's recommendation is to authorize the purchase of a used 2005 Freightliner tanker truck from Erickson Tank and Pump in amount not to exceed $68,500 plus license and document fees.
Would this be the backup?
It will still remain the number 2 truck, yes.
And how many hours are on the one
There's quite
that's dead?
Oh, I don't have that.
On the existing backup truck?
Yeah.
The dead one?
It's scrap iron.
Okay.
It should have been gotten rid of a long time ago.
Okay.
But if I may, I have some, I don't know, concerns, comments, whatever you, I'm not a fan of Freightliners. They're not really, to my way of thinking, a good truck to take off highway. They're not built for going off highway. And I'm not really happy about a 300 horse engine on that size of a tanker. I realize it's an emergency and I understand all that, but I'd really like to see you work towards finding a truck that's actually built to go off-road, like where it's going. I mean.
Yeah, we had some of the same concerns about this being a lighter vehicle, and the thing I didn't mention, it's in your written report. It does only have a weight rating, a legal weight rating of about 51,000 total pound gross weight. And that would allow us to, well, it's got a 3,000 gallon tank on it, it only allows us to haul about 2,500 gallons at a time to be legal with it. So we're talking about operating this one with less weight than the old one historically has. I should have provided copies in the pictures in the packet, but it's a very short coupled vehicle, which I think will actually help with the off-road character of it. That's one of the reasons that it has a lesser weight carrying capacity. It's also short enough that it doesn't have the third axle on it like our existing one does. We had quite a bit of conversation about whether the truck that we're recommending tonight would adequately meet our needs. The truck that we're getting rid of is like I say, 28 years old. It's our primary truck for 23 of those years. It also has the smaller engine and a 10-speed transmission in it. I was really hoping we'd find something with a 13-speed, maybe 350 horse. But they just were not, we didn't find anything that was reasonable.
What I'm saying is, I understand that you need a truck, and I don't have any objections to that, but I'd really like to see him come up with a long-range plan to get a better truck.
Oh,
like
yes.
A truck that's made to go off highway, because ultimately, I think that the new Freightliner is probably going to shake itself to pieces. Moody Road is brutal.
We're also looking at alternate sludge sites that have better access, but they seem to be further away. So, yes, so, in terms of a long-range plan, we're thinking of this as the number 2 truck for, and we'd be looking at a new number 1 truck, have our existing 3,000 gallon truck roll back into a secondary role at that time. So maybe I misunderstood your original comment. Yes, we are also thinking along those same lines for the long range plan.
I realize you need it, and it'll suffice for a few years, but I think making a little more of a long range plan would be good.
Any other questions?
Yes. What is the surplus value of the 1991 tanker?
Well, we're actually, the purchase, company that we're looking at purchasing this from is expressed a potential interest in receiving the old truck as a trade-in. It definitely needs a different engine put in it. We didn't have enough information to bring that to you tonight, so I'm not recommending a method of disposal at this time, whether we end up taking it to an auction. We'll need to come back to the council and have it declared surplus before we could do that. I guess we could actually amend the motion tonight and have it declared surplus to give it some options if council wanted to, but we are in discussion with the seller to see if they have interest in it as a surplus, or as a trade-in.
That's good to know. Has anyone considered that the acronym for biosolid? I had to put that in. I'm sorry.
No.
Tell us.
The biosolid truck.
Yes. Yes.
Anything else?
I got a few.
Do we need to make a
Yes,
motion?
Rob?
Just the obvious question, when these trucks are loaded, can they go over the bridge with the new flags on them now?
No. But that was one of the first things we identified. Our biosolids trucks do not need to go over that bridge.
Just curious. And what was the timeline on the Aquatex vacuum truck that you had these funds saved for?
We were looking at this year, more probably next year. We've actually got a line on one that's considerably cheaper. We may still be coming to the council this year, even if we do this purchase, that there might still be adequate funds to complete the purchase of the Aquatex replacement this year as well.
So it will be a replacement or an addition?
We're still having that conversation. There's a lot of desire in the department for it to be an addition, because that's a truck that's out nearly daily, and we do have competition in-house for it as different crews are needing it at the same time. Also, when the Aquatex down, we do find ourselves struggling with arranging for a backup truck, whether it's from Crestline Construction or ODOT, or we've made arrangements with Peterson Cat to have a rental on standby because it's one of the trucks we use in emergency response to sewer backups and things like that. So we are having that discussion, and I don't have a final answer for you tonight on that. The council will actually have the final answer on that, I should say. We would have a recommendation we'd like for, no, I don't have that ready for you.
Okay.
Does the emergency enter into this because we're down to one truck and that's the emergency?
Yes. Yeah. Like I say, it's been used recently to be running two trucks at the same time. The wastewater treatment plant operations staff has a plan that as we get back into, the weather's prevented us from hauling biosolids for a while. The field's been too wet. As we get back into hauling, the first thing they'll try to do is catch up with running a single truck longer days. They may end up running it basically double shifts with two drivers on the same truck. And if we can't catch up that way, then we'll look at some contracted assistance from Bishop or Speedy or something like that, which we've done in the past, but those hauling operations have to occur under our direction and under our permit. So that's kind of phase 3 if we end up having to go there.
Any other questions or discussion?
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
So I guess this hasn't come up before in the 2 years that I've been here, although my very first council meeting, we did discuss sludge and no one warned me not to eat first. I'm just curious because you're referring to off-road and you're referring to how far it is, and I'm not familiar with this part of the process. Like, how far are you taking this stuff?
Just to be clear, this truck really doesn't, in the normal, or either of the two hauling trucks, they go off highway, but they don't necessarily go off-road. The part of the road that Councilor Brown is referring to is a very rough gravel county road, but once the material is hauled from the wastewater treatment plant to the field where it's going to be applied, and it's normally transferred into what we call this gator. It's another tank truck with great big flotation wheels on it that drives through the field and applies the biosolids so it can be used as fertilizer, farming operation. So it does, Councilor Brown is exactly right in that it gets some pretty rough duty, but it is predominantly on some sort of a road, not being the vehicle that's in the field.
Oh, we're not going jeeping?
Not going jeeping.
Just clarifying. Thank you.
Okay, anybody willing to make a motion to purchase the biosolid truck?
Thank you.
I would move to authorize the purchase of a used 2005 Freightliner tanker truck from Erickson Tank and Pump in the amount not to exceed $68,500 plus license and document fees.
I'll second that.
So moved and seconded.
Discussion?
Any more
Would you
discussion?
accept a friendly amendment to say and declare the truck it is replacing a surplus?
I think he,
That would be helpful to us, and we could have some flexibility as we continue with trade-in discussions. It's entirely up to the council.
Do you want me to just add that to the?
Yeah. Would you?
Do I just also?
Rod have to approve it because.
I think what Darcy technically did was
I think it's
move
a
to
good-
amend,
yeah,
so
right.
you'll need a second to the motion to amend.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
discussion on what Darcy asked, though, just to be clear, because in your dissertation, you talked about bringing back a proposal after doing some investigation or whatnot regarding that truck. So does that change at all?
Whatever the council would like. I mean, if we.
Typically, once the city council declares it surplus, it's up to the staff to make the decision on how it's disposed of, whether we sell it at auction or trade it in.
Yeah. I just wanted to get that out there. Either way, whether it's now or later, it's still going to be on our experts' recommendation, and I'm good with that. I just wanted to make sure we were clear.
Okay.
No problem.
Do I hear a second to Darcy's amendment?
I did second it.
You did second that, okay. All those in favor of amending the motion to declare the old truck surplus, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. The motion is hereby amended.
Now you have to vote on the motion.
No, we have to vote on the motion.
Okay.
Amended motion.
All those in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, discussion items. A, city council rules. I asked it to stay on the agenda, and this is coming out of a couple things. One is, when I was talking to the Citizens Academy at its first meeting, I was talking about the charter and the council rules, and I was kind of taken aback by the 19 pages of rules, and I was kind of more amused by it than anything else. And then Councilor Runyon said something to me about it, and I think I'm not wanting to get into the weeds tonight as far as what we should do to amend the rules, but I am looking for some suggestions on a process for looking at these rules and bringing back to the city council some changes or amendments. Any thoughts?
I'll go, since you mentioned my name.
Yes.
I think it'd be a good discussion for at least 20 or 30 minutes, maybe as much as 45 of our retreat that we are scheduling in March as one idea, unless someone has a better idea. That'd be a good place to do that. Frankly, whenever we do that, I'll show you my notes, which clearly delete a lot of it. There's just a lot could be cleaned up. There's also things in the, not just, what is it, the charter or rules or whatever, let's see here, the code of conduct and council rules. There are conflicting things throughout that have circled regarding people speaking at the meetings and how long it is and things like that. There's just a number of questions. There's one that's just flat wrong about people calling for the question, ending discussion, and that's not true. It takes a 2/3 vote from that, asking for the question. So we just need to go through, clean this up. I think we can shorten it down a great deal and basically come to grips with the golden rule and go from there, maybe.
I've been on this council for 6 years. I've probably read this at least once a year since I've been on here. You're new, and you're coming up. Every time I read it, I come up with something new, something different, so.
So that'd be my recommendation, is take it to the retreat, and let's spend a little time and work on it.
My concern, not so much as it's a retreat, I'm very skeptical that 45 minutes will cover it, but.
No more than an hour.
There are two other alternatives I think are out there. One is to form a subcommittee of 2 or 3 of us to meet and come back to the council with a recommendation. And that's under the premise that it would take more than 45 minutes or an hour. Or is have a council work session and make it voluntary, where council members who are interested in having input into the changes show up, and we can dedicate as much time as we need to, hopefully in one meeting. So.
All those are good with me, any of them.
Yeah, Rod and I have talked enough so all 3 of those are at least what Rod and I have at least come up with in the way of alternatives. So Anybody got any,
I'd nominate you and Rod to be the committee.
Chair did not recognize.
Well, I have Did you ask for permission to speak? It's on page 4.
I'd warned Rich that I had trouble painting inside the lines.
Well, as someone who's had those rules used against her, or tried to use against her, I would say that probably we need to have our council retreat and sort of bond as a council and get on the same page about what exactly we are doing here as city councilors and what our philosophy is for this time together. I think that the rules were originally put forward trying to have some extra control, but we are elected officials, and so I think I don't think that we need that heavy hand, and I also don't know that it's legal, so I would love to see us do the retreat first, and because I think we are going to, you know, get a lot of things worked out, and I think it will make it easier maybe to do some kind of either a committee or a work group after that, because everybody will be more clear on exactly what we're asking them to do.
Okay, just so I understand, you weren't suggesting, at first I thought you were suggesting we actually talk about it at the retreat. You're saying we shouldn't talk about it until after the retreat.
Yes, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, and I also hear you suggesting perhaps that the facilitator, that we tell the facilitator we'd like to spend a certain amount of time at the retreat working on team building. Is that what I'm hearing? Mm-hmm. Okay, as opposed to policy issues.
Just part of it, because how you deal with policy issues and how you interact with each other has to do with team building. And if you have a good, strong team and a base, then the rest of it is much easier.
I can support that. I think that, you know, after the chance to get together and have a chance to discuss, and then I think a work group of anyone that's interested that wants to be there would probably be my first choice. And then if that, I would do a subcommittee after that. But that's what I can support.
Okay.
May I say just one thing? And I hate to do it because I'm really going to date myself. But those council rules were actually developed under Mayor Les Kokenauer in 1992, as it came out of League of Oregon Cities as like a model for all city councils to develop rules of procedure. And so it may have been something.
Well, we updated them, or some things were clearly added.
Yes, absolutely. That
I
happens
think,
every 2 years.
Yeah, so that was all I was thinking.
Oh,
I'm not trashing the rules, I'm just saying.
I think it's time for house cleaning. And
Well, I
review.
agree with that. I just wanted you to know that they started out with all good intents.
Okay, to summarize it, from what, this is what I've heard, is that we will ask the facilitator to spend an hour and a half on team building, and after we all team build, we'll be in a much better position to change the rules as we see fit, and at least one counselor, Councilor McLaughlin, and we're all reserving the right to change our minds on this until after the retreat, but he seems to be leaning toward like a voluntary work session of any and all council members who would like to participate. How's that?
That's good.
Yes.
Okay?
So we would not discuss things that we've lined out or anything in the retreat?
No.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay?
That'll be hard.
So you'll get your chance.
And at the retreat, the rules are still in effect at the retreat. Okay. Anything else on this issue?
No.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Street funding discussion.
He's back.
Honorable Mayor and members of council, you may recall that in August of 2018, staff prepared a memo for the city council that outlined some options for consideration that could be implemented to provide additional funding that could be used for street maintenance activities in future years. To help support a discussion around those, council had expressed an interest in understanding what potential shortfall was between our current funding sources and what an optimal street maintenance program would look like. The attached report was presented or developed to help assist the council in understanding what those tasks would look like and what those costs would be. Obviously, we had to make some assumptions and to be sure that everybody was on the same page of what we were including in those assumptions, they're outlined in the staff report, and I'm certainly not suggesting that I go through and read each one of those to you, but there are a couple that I want to highlight. The first one is that for the purpose of this analysis, we strayed a little bit from normal industry standard, which usually considers a street life to be around 20 years. And we said, you know, let's really be optimistic and hope that we're going to get 30 years out of our streets if we did everything to them that we say could happen in this maintenance program. And that would be things like the crack sealing every 5 years and chip sealing every 10 years. And then at the end of 30-year life, then it would be repaved. We made an assumption that the lower traffic local roads that are currently in a fair or better condition could be maintained throughout the rest of their life just with subsequent chip seals and not ever need a hot mix repaving. So this is a little bit different than those of you who may have been participants in street maintenance discussions that we've had before, because we've always stayed with the kind of industry standard 25-year or 20-year pavement life. So we're trying to stretch our dollar as far as we can in this analysis. The other one, I want to have a little bit of discussion just about ADA and sidewalk ramps. They're mentioned in here. We did identify a cost. We identified a number of ramps that currently exist that need upgrades or sidewalks that don't currently have ramps. There's about 1,600 of them in the city. Since this was a 30-year analysis, we went ahead and identified a cost to do all those ramps sometime within that 30-year period. Those costs, as we get further on into the report where we talk about a total maintenance program cost over 30 years and the annual cost, the sidewalk or the ADA ramp costs are not included in that. So I don't want us to get too hung up on the ramp portion of it. I also don't want to get too hung up on the 30-year because we use 30 years because that's what we're using for our street life in here. The current staff is currently developing a transition plan, an ADA transition plan. I am very doubtful that we're going to be able to provide a realistic transition plan that says we're going to get everything done in 30 years. The funding's just not going to be there. It will probably be a longer period of time that we're bringing to the council for consideration. That what we have to do is develop a plan and then adopt it and start making progress towards meeting those ADA needs. So well, we've identified some costs for the ramps. It's really not the bulk of what is included in here for street maintenance. It's all the focus here is around pavement management or driving surface management in cases where it's only chip seals. So I'm hoping to try to provide some clarification there. I already kind of touched on it, but generally speaking, a fully funded maintenance program would look to try to do a chip seal on a crack seal on the streets every 5 years. It's important to do the crack sealing to keep the water from penetrating into that pavement surface, which contributes to its deterioration. It's also important to provide some sort of additional coating on it to deal with the oxidation that occurs, and that's why we've got the chip seals every 10 years. Oxidation causes not only a breakdown of the oils, but it makes that pavement surface brittle and more subject to failure and to additional cracking. One of the challenges we have is that many of our streets don't have proper rock bases under them, and that results in the premature rutting and some things like that. So we've identified costs, included costs in here to reinforce the bases under the roads where there's a need to do so on collectors or on arterial streets. We have not assumed any reinforcement or replacement of the base for the local streets. And as we identified in the report, local streets make up about half of the city street inventory. Those were kind of some of the high points I wanted to talk about in terms of the method that we used, the assumptions we made in developing the the report, you know, where it really comes down to is that if we were implementing a fully funded street maintenance program, the cost of that would be about $1.46 million a year just for the materials or contracted work to do it. And that's if actually almost entirely materials. That's if city and combined city-county crews were doing all the work. If a lot of the work is being done contractually, that 1.46 becomes about 2.72 million.
The reason for that differential is because there's not really any labor figured into the costs of the city repairs.
Yep. Could you say that again?
Speak up to the, okay,
I said that the reason for the large differential in the cost is because there are no labor costs figured into the city's part of
Right.
it.
So we have the equipment, we have the labor, the out-of-pocket costs that we would have to budget for these are the costs to purchase the materials to do the work. And that is, as Councilor Brown pointed out, that's the reason for the big difference between the two, between contracted work cost and in-house work cost.
But wouldn't you have additional labor costs because those people are currently doing other work that they wouldn't be able to do if they were?
We've actually looked at it pretty closely and believe that we can do the amount of work that we're talking about and present in this report with existing staff and the additional support of 2 summer temporary workers. Now, we've been trying to hire 1 to 2 summer seasonal workers for the transportation division the last couple of years, and we have not always been successful in even filling those positions. We have significantly increased the amount that we pay for those positions, being at $15 and $20 an hour, depending on whether they have a commercial driver's license or not, and we still have not always successfully filled those positions the last 2 years. But we did identify that that's what the labor need would be to implement what we've proposed here, or what we've discussed here.
Okay, thank you.
Our current funding sources, we have about $254,000 on a sustained renewable basis from our existing funding sources that can be used for this. And this is after we take out all the, what I've called operational costs for the division. These are the costs for the personnel and to have insurance and fuel and everything, buying the traffic signs and all of that. This is what leaves us $254,000 a year to be able to buy the materials that we use in our street maintenance activities. So that leaves us with a shortfall of about $1.2 million a year from what an optimal street maintenance program would look like compared to what we currently have available to us.
Isn't the optimal street maintenance program unrealistic? I mean, do you think that it'll happen? Unattainable, yes.
I would say that I think funding-wise, it's going to be, well, and it's not, I think it's going to be very difficult to attain. I mean, we're going to, in just a moment, talk about some potential sources, but, you know, as I understood the desire of the council and my assignment was, what would a fully funded street maintenance program look like? So that's what I've tried to develop. And to provide a forum with enough information for the council to discuss whether they're interested in trying to fill a part of that shortfall or not, and how to do that. But I agree, it would be very difficult to reach this level of funding for street maintenance. I don't see us doing it. I don't see any other transportation entity being able to do it. You know, these conversations are happening in many other cities. I, in fact, received some information from Madras as they're having the same conversation. They're asking us, you know, how much money do you have per centerline mile? And they had put together a table comparing them to some other cities. And,
well, you know, I guess one of the things that's most troubling to me about this is we want to have an optimal street maintenance program, but we have a mandate from the federal government to deal with our ADA ramps, and we're kind of in trouble with them because it was somewhat misinterpreted for a period of time
We have a
by
backlog.
almost everybody. I would question how much latitude we really have in getting those done. I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a numbers guy, but as near as I can tell, given the difficulty of some of these ramps in our town that's not level, I think we'd almost have to spend most of $500,000 a year to get it done in 30 years.
Yeah, you're right. We ran that number, and if all the ramps were coming in at the average that we used, it would be $333,000 a year to do all the ramps in 30 years. So yeah, you're real close. And we're not proposing that be our level investment, and that's why I was suggesting earlier that I think it's unlikely our transition plan is going to suggest trying to get completely caught up in 30 years. I think we focus some energies on prioritizing and spending the funds, limited funds we have available in the places that would do the most good and continue to mark progress towards
Will that, do you feel that'll satisfy the feds and the ADA?
Well, everything I've seen, yeah, I mean, I believe the city attorney had an opportunity to look at some other cities, and there are certainly some that are using some long time frames to meet these needs. And also they used a philosophy of prioritizing. For me right now, it feels like our highest priority is, of course, related to this backlog of the projects that we did in the last 2 or 3 years that tripped the triggers that we weren't aware to trip the triggers. And I think that's where we really need to focus our initial energies. Just talking real briefly about the transition plan, this is a plan that we're drafting at the staff level, but ultimately it's going to be coming to the council for review and comment and then ultimate adoption. That then helps us set priorities and focus our attention on what the council wants their attention and what level of funding that gets assigned to that. And I would expect that you're going to have the opportunity to be looking at that. I don't think not sure we'll have it to the council before budget. This year, we'll probably just throw a number into the budget like we did for the current year to make some money available to work on sidewalks if, subject to the budget committee's approval and the council's adoption. But we are working very diligently. One of our engineers, actually, that's right now about 75% of his job is just working on that transition plan.
What's the consequences if we don't do ADA ramps?
I will defer to the city attorney on that. I know that the enforcement is basically out of the Federal Department of Justice.
That's correct. And it is generally complaint driven. I think the city of Portland, recently just settled a lawsuit over their ADA ramps, and I believe Ben was doing that process too that resulted in that plan. I can't remember whether there's any financial sanctions that they can impose, but I think certainly there's that risk, maybe, or risk of not being eligible for some federal grants if we're out of compliance with the federal law. So I think there are potential consequences.
I believe the Ben case was actually a settlement that involved ODOT, and their settlement somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million over the next 10 years.
That was my understanding.
Whoa.
Yeah, I think the settlement actually comes down to they get the cities to say, okay, what are you going to do about this? How much are you going to spend? And the numbers that they are talking about can get pretty high, but I think we want to try to avoid that because it just...
So if you act like, if you are in the process of doing something,
I think that would put us in a much better position to, if we received a complaint from the Department of Justice, we can say we have a process in place and a plan in place. It would certainly help us.
It's also come to an issue for us with any ODOT funding or funding, like we had ODOT do the paving for us out on East 2nd Street. You're going to see some of the ramps in the roundabout rebuilt because that ended up being, again, after the fact understood even by ODOT that we were going to have to get compliant with. And those are, again, these are almost brand new ramps. ODOT's failure, gosh, it's in the high 90% of their own ramps. even recently constructed. So the standards for the construction of these ramps, and it's just about slopes and approaches and bypasses are quite stringent. And failure of any one measurement makes the entire ramp fail in inspection or passing the approval process. So I didn't want to get, I was trying to avoid getting too sidetracked on ramps tonight.
Well,
they're really an important part of what we need to be thinking about.
We have to deal with the ramps.
Yes.
We want to have a street maintenance program, but we have to deal with the ramps. So we really can't hardly do what we want until we do what we have to do.
And there's some opportunities. Chris Harrell, our Transportation Division Manager, and I have had a chance to talk about this in some detail. And even while we're doing the design and catching up with what I'll refer to again as this backlog of the ramps related to paving projects that we did in the last 2 or 3 years, we probably have 10 to 15, maybe even a little bit higher percent of our streets that don't have existing curbs or sidewalks, and so we can go in and do paving projects on them and not trigger these requirements. You're not required to put in sidewalks and ADA facilities just because you're paving the street in places that don't have them. What you're required to do is if there's a sidewalk there, you have to make that sidewalk compliant as you go through and are paving that street.
Well, the problem with that philosophy is you're paving streets that handle a low volume of traffic, and your 2nd Street and 6th Street that desperately need to be repaired aren't getting the attention.
I totally agree.
You can't, there's just no way to tap dance around the real problem.
But what's the use of putting in an ADA ramp if once somebody uses that ramp, they go on to a street that they could fall apart in?
I don't have an answer for that question.
Why don't we finish your report and then get the are you done with your?
I am. We provided some suggestions for possible topics of discussion, what scenarios might look like. There's one example provided in there, what the council might, types of things, but yeah, I'm here for your questions.
Okay, Rod, you got to.
So, Dave and I sat on the Lower John Day Area Committee on Transportation for a number of years together, and for some reason I can't access all my notes that were on a particular county's website. But just to get it out there, because it was talked about a lot at those meetings, is because there's a federal mandate coming down due to a lawsuit coming to the state, is there any money from ODOT available to a community such as the Dalles?
Well, there's some, but they get authorized through what we would commonly refer to as the STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. We have a project currently identified for funding in the next STIP, and the next STIP is 2021 to 2024.
Right.
We currently have around $800,000 as that STIP is currently drafted for making these types of improvements along West 6th Street, to add the center turn lane from Snipes out to Hostetler, to replace the sidewalks through that entire section with the proper bypasses and proper slopes with the driveway cuts and ADA ramps at the intersections. But there's not a big pot of money that can be relied on a continuous annual basis to do this kind of work.
But we do have some money sitting out there a couple of years from now.
We do see some money out there a few years in the future that we're working hard to keep in the plan.
And the other thing, it's a visual thing, and Russ knows about this, it was discussed a lot at those area transportation meetings, is that when you picture a ramp, one size does not fit all. Topography has a lot to do with what kind of ramp can be placed, so it's not just one price and plug them in everywhere you want to go.
We have to survey and design each individual corner for these projects. And actually, unfortunately, she left. I'd really like to do a little bit of a shout out to Letty and Blue Zones. They got up against the end of this last calendar year and had some project money left over. Money that they could use for operations of the program. It had to be spent on a project, so they approached us and asked us if we had a use for it. They made $20,000 available for us, and we got a contract in place because they could prepay for the work. And a engineering firm was hired to do this field survey work for 112 ramps, or excuse me, 112 corners here in town. That then we can take that survey information. Our engineers aren't out spending their time doing the survey. We can go straight into design on those. And we focused that survey work on our backlog.
Right.
So that was a real benefit to the city that Blue Zone was able to make available to us, and we tried to take full advantage of it.
So this is another area where speaking to our legislators throughout the state, not just for our own area, can be quite helpful down the road to help cities out. Because if you think about it, we're talking about how many thousands, 12,000 curb cuts if we did them all. Now think about Portland, Eugene, Springfield, Medford. I mean, we are on the small end of it, and it's enough money to bankrupt a community. So we really need to do a lot of work to the legislature to find out how we get some help, because all the communities are going to be out there looking for help.
Do you have any other questions, Rod? No? Darcy, did you have questions?
Yeah. So when taking into consideration which order you want to do things first, I understand that the street you're working on makes sense because you're already right there, but the whole point of the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, is to make things more accessible for them. And then we have the blue zones here wanting, us to be more of a walking community. And West 6th Street in particular, I think if it felt safer to people, that was something when they came out and did an assessment that there would probably be a lot more foot traffic. So are we taking into consideration that in some of these places, if we put the ramps there, first of all, it's in areas that are more likely to get used with walking, so we're also less likely to trigger someone bringing a lawsuit against us, but also increasing the income for tourism, and it seems like there's a lot of benefits. So it's good for people with strollers, people in scooters, people in wheelchairs. I mean, we have to care about those people in our community too, not just whether or not we're going to get sued.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we've been, the prioritization that we've incorporated into the plan as we're developing it, we're focusing on, for lack of a better term, busier streets first. We're focusing on routes to schools first. Some of the lower traffic residentials will be later in the
Public buildings would be at the top of the list.
Yeah. And so we're going to have a draft of this prioritization criteria included in the plan for council's consideration. I will say that we've been doing all the work at the staff level. We haven't brought together like an outside work group, and maybe the council's going to look at what we've drafted and ask for some broader input. That would certainly be within your purview to do so. But those are the types of concepts we've tried to incorporate into the transition plan for drafting.
But after hearing you tonight in your presentation, I have a high degree of confidence that we seem to have a plan, even though we have lack of money. But, some of these answers are there, and you've done a good job, so I do appreciate that, and your staff. And we have a mission before us to make improvement and find ways to make it happen. Perhaps there'll be some future source of revenue. Perhaps the forests, some will have modified re-entrance so that we can get some timber money, maybe something else, but concentrating on areas of high use, like the plan that I'm hearing you talk about, is the right way to move. And so I just want to let you know that thank you for your work and letting us know what's happening, and we'll work together.
Thank you.
I agree that you should get someone who needs ADA accessible access to give you some feedback, whether that's formally or not. I sit on another committee, and we were trying to make some changes, and then we finally got someone in a wheelchair to participate in the committee, and he was like, oh no, you don't need to do all that, like just do this and it'd be great. And so it really is important to get their feedback. They're the ones using it, and we might find that that's more helpful.
I agree with that.
I have a question about the gas tax. That takes a vote of the people.
To change it now, yes.
But that wasn't the case before?
No.
Yeah, okay.
That requirement, I believe, and Gene could double check me, but I believe that requirement came in with HB House Bill 2017 that provided some additional state funding to be allocated to local jurisdictions. And then one of the caveats was that any local jurisdiction that wanted to either implement a new gas tax or increase the one they had required a vote of the people to make this.
Our local ordinance already had that language in it that only a vote of the people. So I think it's always been the vote of the people.
So the first 3 cents were voted on?
Yes.
And what is the current rate?
3 cents per
3
gallon.
3 cents.
So even if we wanted to increase it by a half a cent, that would go up to the vote?
Yes.
Okay, do we have any idea how much of the gas tax is generated from tourists or non-residents of the city, I guess?
I can't imagine.
Is there, I can't believe that retail establishments keep track of that kind of stuff, I would think. They don't?
I don't know how they would. How would they know if they were a tourist or not?
When I get gas, a lot of times they ask me to put my zip code in.
And that's, I think, more around the validation of the credit card, though. That's not,
Lisa, do you have a comment?
So that's about the only way they can track is, some of our retail stores do track by zip code, and that's the only way that they can, but I don't know how much that information is.
I've never seen a gas
available
station do that.
to
No.
the public, so.
Okay. I mean, it just seems to me that we can get non-residents of the city to pick up a portion of this, that'd be the way.
well, and I'll stray just a little bit from the staff report. Part of the TRT used to go to streets way back in the day. Before, Julie would remember that, I think, or she's looking at like she
I
does it.
don't remember, but.
And it was probably in the early 90s. It was when the Visitor and Convention Bureau was developed, that those funds were transferred from going to street operations to Convention and Visitors Bureau.
I think I've asked that question at just about every budget meeting that I've attended. That's why we can't, the tourists are using our streets just as much as anybody else. Why shouldn't they contribute something? You know, everybody benefits from street, even if you don't own a car. You know, grandma that gets Meals on Wheels benefits from the streets. It's, you know.
Well, we can, and we do use those TRT dollars for police, and I thought that we had used at least a little bit of it for streets, but the question is, that money can only be used for certain things, and so what do we want to spend it on if it's limited?
And it really, the transient room tax revenues do go into the general fund, so for instance, some of the things that we spoke about in this staff report of using general fund money for to pay for the signal and street lights and to do cash contribution to the transportation, while they're general funds, so are the transient room tax revenues, general funds, so same pot, ultimately.
Whether it's labeled or not.
Right.
Is there any doubt in your mind that if you did get the sufficient money, that whether it's contracted out or whether we do it in-house, we would be able to finish the job, do a year's work and get it done? I mean, so many times you see public works projects that they don't get done because there's just too much work. There's too much and, if it is in-house, like Darcy had brought up, there's other things that need to be done that they're not getting to.
We felt pretty comfortable, and that was the point of a pretty long conversation between Chris and I one afternoon last week or 2 weeks ago. And he was pretty confident that the level of work that we have identified in this report we could do in-house with the caveat of those 2 summer seasons.
I might be the only one that wants this, but can we get a map that shows which streets are collector streets, which ones are arterial, which ones are local? I'd like to get one of those.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else got any questions or comments? I'm not sensing any real sense of direction here.
I really would appreciate a sense of direction because we're trying to work to budget right now. So if it is a priority of the council to fund somehow this proposal at some level, I really would like to know that there's consensus or there's no consensus, because, that's a substantial amount of money that I would take from the general fund.
We don't have a choice. I don't know why, I don't understand why we're even having a conversation about whether we're going to fund it or not. We don't have a choice as far as the ramps are concerned. They have to get funded. I mean, I understand the streets is an option. You can ignore them a long time, but you can't ignore the federal government.
I think what Julie is asking for is
how you would
how
like
we're
to
going to fund the ramps or whatever else. Rod?
So, I agree with you, but it has to be a phased-in approach over a period of years. So what I'd like to see is what Dave has suggested, bringing back a draft proposal of priority for city buildings, most frequented areas, the high-traffic areas, as Darcy pointed out. Well, he brought back something that would give us an idea of what we need to be looking at for your budget information for the coming meetings at the end of April and early May.
Well, if we're talking dollars, you suggested that your model might be somewhere in the area of
$333,000 a year.
But what if it's more?
We hit them all.
Well, we have to start somewhere. If next year we don't have enough money to achieve where we're going, we'll have to find some more money. I mean, we can't kick this can down the road.
Understand that. In 2 weeks, would you have a list for us of the streets and buildings you think need to be attacked first?
So I just want to be sure that I'm addressing the correct question. Are you referring primarily to the ramps? Okay.
That part.
Dale, do you know where Mike is on his transition plan? He just put out a...
Because we meet again on the 6th of February.
Yeah, we should,
Redo?
Isn't that our next meeting?
11th.
11th.
Getting the draft out and getting that all reviewed, but we should be able to have something to be looked at and passed on.
Well, to be back to council in 2 weeks, so the report would have to be submitted in 2 days.
We're kind of putting the cart ahead of the horse if we're trying to figure out what ramps we're going to fix and we don't have any money source yet. So I think we need to figure out how we're going to pay for it. We've got a rough estimate of somewhere in the $335,000 range. Let's see if we can come up with some money to get started and then figure out which ramps we're going to do.
The ramps that Dave alluded to, that we were getting the surveying done with the Blue Zones money, is right now we're getting all the ramps on Union Street from 4th Street up to 10th Street, and then on 10th Street from basically Jordan over to Kelly Avenue. That whole stretch, and we're really looking at focusing probably on that 10th Street section, because there's a lot of those corners that don't even have a ramp. It's a 6-inch high curb. And that is, that's one of the major collector streets in town. It's a pathway from the shopping area up to the high school, and so that's the area that we're getting the survey done right now.
Coincides with the paving projects we did in the last couple of years, so they're part of the backlog.
I think any more information than that is, I don't think the council needs to know every location, every ramp.
No.
So I think Dale's just description suffices. I think what we need to do to go forward is what Russ has suggested. We need to identify funding sources to come up with the money.
Thank you. Yes, may I say something? Or may I ask a question? Okay. One of the things that we considered back in July, which is the memo following your staff report, was to implement a transportation maintenance fee, monthly fee on the water bill, which would, if it was $5 a month, would generate about $325,000 a year, which is very close to what Dave was saying earlier about the cost for the ADA ramp portion of the street maintenance. And so I was just curious if there's any interest in pursuing that as an option, or shall I take that off the table?
I realize it's not popular, but the streets have been, well, I won't put it the way I'd like to, but they've kind of been coming in second best for a long time, and pulling another $330-some thousand out of what we've got isn't isn't going to get them any better. Nobody wants to pay more. I certainly don't want to pay any more, but it's $60 a year. It's not a tremendous amount of money. It might be to some people, but what are we going to do? I mean, you got to pay for it. It's got to come from somewhere, and you can't pull it out of a hat.
It would be for people on fixed incomes, Social Security at what, $700 to $900 a month?
That, some people, that's what they live
I
on.
thought he was talking about the bill.
No,
Oh, no,
I'm
no.
talking about people living on
Sorry.
minimum amounts of money per month, and that $5 is substantial. However, I'm just, I think that people need to know that we have these requirements, and, we're working to find ways to pay, or to pay for these things. I think education, I think if we had buy-in, if people were to say, yeah, we need it, and we could have some type of a gradated plan or something, I don't know the results, but in order to make it fair and look for possible sources of revenue to pay for this, I think that's what our mission is right now, it looks like. Taking it from the general fund, though, it means it'll be taking something from another program or programs to pay for this, and so we're also going to hear from those people not receiving those supports any longer. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct, but I did identify quite a large amount of general fund money with the increase that we're expecting in the franchise fees for the next year.
Well, there's no, right.
And paint that as a contribution to the street fund and the general fund taking over the responsibility for paying for the street and signal lights are two things in my mind that are sustainable. So that's what I was looking for when we were working on the staff report, was stable funding, not just this year we'll give this much and next year we'll give that much. Because to do a decent maintenance program, you have to know you're going to have that revenue every year.
Correct.
Yeah, it has to be a constant.
Right. And I guess I was hoping to hear tonight, yes, that's what we want to do, or no, that's not what we want to do. Is the street maintenance important enough to do those commitments, in your opinions?
Is the subsidy in the general fund been steady over the years? Or is it very
No,
volatile?
it's been very volatile and mostly not at all. Except for we recently, about maybe 5 years ago now, we dedicated a portion of the Northwest Natural franchise
5 or 6
fee.
years ago, we dedicated $84,000 from the
That's been
franchise fee for
4 or 5 years ago.
Northwest Gas. So that was $84,000 that was put in. And then for 3 years in a row, we put in $150,000 general contribution from the general fund. It's not in the current year, but we did it for the 3 years prior to that.
I was going to say 2 years.
But the reason we didn't get it last year was because we had a surplus, because the work didn't get done.
Yeah.
Right. But that was never kind of, I guess that was never stated, this is what we want to do every year. It was always on the chopping block, so to speak.
Rob?
So, of course, I wasn't here last July and whatnot, but to answer Julie's question, or at least you're looking for direction.
Yes.
We've been kind of given a direction of $300,000 to $500,000 per year, okay? So there's a direction, but I still think our next council meeting, if we came back with actual plan that shows us what he would be looking at over that next year, that would be good to have. So we're actually looking at something where the money will be applied and can make some sense of it. I'm also not totally sure where, so I mean, giving direction to you, that's the amount. It's somewhere in there, okay? That kind of answers your question, I think. We could probably pretty much all agree on that. But what I'm saying is I don't know enough about where our revenues come from and whatnot. I mean, I heard tonight that we had $450,000 put back for an Aqua something truck, and we just took 68 out of that. That leaves 380 some, and it sounds like that'd take care of the first year.
But that's not stable funding.
I know, but I'm just saying, I need to know more about the revenues before I can start
But
putting arrows into it.
Haven't we had a large increase in TRT money?
Well,
I don't think
And-
it's been large.
I think percentage-wise it might be there, but when you look at the volume of dollars that we need, it's probably not.
Yeah.
Well,
and again, that's also general fund.
Well, all I'm trying to get at to shorten this down is that gives her some direction, but I'd still like to see that list coming forward, what you think over the next 12 months, next fiscal year, where you would start and what streets would be involved as far as curb cuts, the ADA part. That's all and that's to answer what Russ was talking about, the ADA part that we can't get away from, that we have to start working on.
But we have to identify funding before we need to identify the streets. We know we've got 1,600 curb cuts in town to work on.
There are some priority ones of public buildings and
That's not our
high-traffic
problem,
areas.
that's his problem.
Oh, okay.
The funding is our problem. We have to give him the money to fix the problems that he feels are in the most need. I don't understand what's so tough about this. It's not rocket science.
I understand that.
well,
It doesn't hurt to have a list of where that money's going to be spent.
see, this is what I was talking about at the last meeting, though, when I said when we give that money to the college, that we don't know what we're saying no to. And if I would have known about this before we voted on that, that could have made a big decision. This is something that is required of us as a city. And instead, we gave our money to the college. I support that project, but we have,
Future enterprise zone funds.
yes,
And so that wouldn't be, in my opinion, well, I guess it would be stable for 12 years, because then it's gone.
right. But the other piece of that is that would then give us enough years or
To come up with something
for
else.
example, increase our tax base, because that is stable funding. We maybe should encourage urban renewal, which is now a separate agency, to focus on putting that money toward projects that have immediate tax increases. Get those property taxes back on the rolls or increase the amount of property taxes that people are paying. If we decide that that's our priority and that's how we spend some money to make more money, then we have a stable funding solution for these other problems that we have. And we're talking about whether we're going to come up with this money and where we're going to come up with it, but this is the only time you're asking me what I care about in the budget until Budget Committee. Like, I don't get a say in whether I want blue zones funded in your proposal. I don't get a say about anything else. And so this whole process is very limited, and it's only what I'm spoon-fed, and I have to make a decision based on that. And I don't mean to make that personal, I'm just really frustrated with the situation.
I'm also concerned because I feel like if we're going to use that large amount of money out of the general fund, there will be a lot of things that go by the wayside of programs that we have supported over the years or in the past, because there has to be a little give and take.
Right, but this is this is a problem that's been a long time in the making, and it only comes to us, and you want a decision immediately, and it comes separately from other financial decisions.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ask you for an immediate decision. What I'm just trying to get is some direction. And this has been, we've been talking about this for 4 years, off and on, and just kind of, it's a problem, and so based upon the request to get this information from Dave, I was just trying to outline, here's what it could look like.
Yeah, I think the ADA thing has kind of amplified our street funding problem. I think that's, it's something that's come to light within the last 12 months. And I think now it's time to fish or cut bait,
But this is big, we should have had a work session on this.
Oh, we still can.
We still can. The reason we put it on this agenda was because we didn't have any other items, so we thought it would allow lots of time for discussion.
It seems to me that either, unless somebody wants to suggest that we look into or implement a 3-cent or another fuel tax, or a monthly charge on the water bill.
It's about 5.
And if we're not willing to at least bite the bullet and go ahead with that, I think we're all going to be faced with trying to scrape it out of the general fund again. So either we have another work session to discuss this before the budget process begins, or we leave it to the staff to make do with the general fund. That's kind of where I see it.
Well, I want to know what it looks like if you scrape it out of the general fund before I decide whether or not I'm in favor of any kind of gas tax, or whether there's the possibility of doing part of it. And the same thing with, you know, I mean, both
Increasing
the
the
gas
bill.
tax and on the utility bills, that's very regressive. And there are some people who literally don't have that $5 a month, that is a gallon of milk and a thing of eggs. And so we have to be very careful about that. Maybe it's nothing to us, but it is everything to some people.
How about a work session, and, let's see, the budget starts in April?
Well,
The budget committee begins in April,
The end of April.
end of April.
So we have to present you a balanced budget, so we're all working on departmental things now.
We're just over 2 weeks out from submitting our budgets to the finance department, so those aren't final. I mean, we can continue to work on it, but that's our timeline of where we currently are in the budget process.
What else would you like to discuss at a separate work session?
Did you,
Well, where in the general fund will we be looking at cuts? That's what I'd want to discuss. I mean, because we're talking about where are we going to come up with the money, I want to discuss what are the options for coming up with the money.
Right. I really don't know that yet, because I have no direction as to, you know, if this is, I haven't started developing that part of the budget, because I was hoping tonight I would hear, this is important, this is not important, so I know how to develop the budget.
It's hard to determine, I mean, we agree it's important, but it's hard to know if it's more important than something
A, B, and
else.
C. Okay.
well, a work session may be in order before we really get into the budget, give the staff that direction. How about that? A special work session.
I would say yes.
Okay.
We can't make any decisions without having the information, but we know it's a priority, that those ramps are a priority that we have to address. And how we're going to do that, we'll have to answer some of those questions about where the money's going to come. I'm not in favor of passing increases in any cost without looking at cuts as well, looking at ways to trim our budgets. Of course, that's not going to be popular either. No matter what we do, it's not going to be popular, but...
So have you given Dave direction on what kind of information you want for this work session?
I'm liking what Rod is suggesting, is that you prioritize areas like we've done this before. We've made an area where it's the place where most people that would be needing those ramps would be federal, state, local buildings, where meeting places like libraries, schools, shopping areas, senior programs in those general areas. I think an assessment, attacking 1,600 ramps, even in 30 years is going to be stretching it. So you're going to have to reduce that down to say, what is a manageable in a year? How many could you possibly change out in a given period, in a summer period?
And perhaps I should be clear, we have assumed that concrete work for ramp upgrades would be contracted work. We wouldn't be taking on that task in-house. So basically, how many we could accomplish would depend on how much money was available to do it.
Yes. If we don't give them the funding, there won't be any ramps. So we need to get the horse ahead of the cart on this deal.
We can tell you, as Dale said, possibly where the first 112 will be.
There you go. Let's start with that.
And that's 10th Street corridor and Union Street.
Sometimes you have to load the cart to decide how many horses you need.
So I'm in favor of...
You gotta feed the horse to get it going anywhere.
Setting up some type of expectation with, and then we have some set amount. We know the costs, we know the time periods, and then we can take a look and see if we can build.
That contract work goes out for bid. Dave, didn't you go out for a bid on a ramp modification at the roundabout? And you were hoping to get it for somewhere in the $15,000 range, and it came in over $30,000?
That's why
There's no way to know for sure, Tim, not until you're going out for bids.
All right.
But we already
Never-
have the dollar amount, right? 300 and...
I understand that, but, you know,
330,000,
that's...
sorry, I didn't write it down here.
325.
325,000, that's what we need to find?
333.
335.
Just to address
I think that's...
the ramps.
That's to
not
do all the ramps of the city in a
street
30-year
not
period.
street
And I was
And that would be
a
every
year.
year.
That we
every
would
year
get a little
for
bit
30
sidetracked
years.
on the ramps, which, yes, we need to develop a plan, we need to start working towards, but
But
I would,
that takes
I'm going
away
to probably
from
maybe
the
go further than I
street
should, and I would
maintenance.
encourage the council to think about beyond the need for the ramps and just the maintenance of the street surfaces themselves, which we tried to,
You have to do both.
we have to do
Ramps
both.
that go to nothing.
Yes.
Well, didn't you already
Exactly. That's
have
what
an
I
idea
said.
of what you're going to ask for street maintenance each year before we
I
added this
have-
ADA thing in?
I was presenting this information about what we currently have available and what we could do with an extra increment of funding with, and just as examples, one was $500,000 and one was $1 million. And then the hope was that, council would say, well, we support, I'm going to just put words out there, not, we support a $2 or 3-month or $4 a month fee that will bring in this much money and we can add that to the existing funding. Or we support the general fund paying for the street lights downtown, which will free up almost $150,000 a year in existing street operations costs for maintenance. Those types of things, and we would build the budget around that. Then we could, when we see the level of funding, we can develop that list of, okay, we have this much funding, these are the streets that we can do, or this is the amount of streets that we can do, and our capital improvement plan starts to get built around the funding.
Okay, are we still talking about having a special work session on this?
I think that what we're looking for is that high-level policy type support from the city council. Infrastructure is your number one goal, protecting the infrastructure of the city.
Right.
And so if you direct us to come up with a certain level of funding as best we can, that's how we'll start working the budget. And sorry to say this, but I feel like we're taking that dive into doing staff's work by saying, well, we want to know which ramps you're going to fix or which streets you're going to pave. None if we don't know if we can fund it or not. So we're looking for a big level support, not diving down into the weeds and trying to figure out if it's $1.32 or $5.38 for a ramp. You know what I mean? We need to know whether or not this is important to you enough for us to develop the budget with that in our mind.
I'm hearing that it is a very important issue. I'm also hearing nobody is supporting an increase on the bill, and no one is suggesting or supporting an increase in the gas tax, which leaves us again with the general fund.
Okay.
So, have I summarized that correctly?
Well, my position was slightly more nuanced. It was like, I want to know what it does to the general
Right.
budget before I decide if I want to, because I don't really want to do those
Okay,
other
and I
things,
think
but I
that's
might
what
have to do
if we have
that.
to have, either we have a work session to discuss that very issue, or we wait till the budget process and do it then.
Work schedule or work session.
Okay.
The sooner the
And I've
better.
got some ideas on giving the staff some direction on coming back to the council at this work session with information that would allow us to make a decision as to how much, if any, subsidy to the general fund we want to use for streets and ramps. Okay? Okay, so it seems to me what we should do is get our calendars out and pick a date.
No, I do not. I don't bring my telephone to meetings.
I need a drink. I'm almost sure.
How about the week, next week?
We're probably going to need to know what kind of direction you're going to give us so we know if we have enough time to prepare in a week to provide you with whatever you
Okay.
need.
Yeah, and I'll get with you on that, but I don't know if that'll be enough time. How about the week of the 18th? Monday, the 18th,
Monday's a holiday.
President's Day.
It'd be a perfect day for a work session.
I'm available.
What's that?
I am available even though it's a holiday.
Well, the staff won't.
The staff won't be.
Okay, how about Tuesday, the 19th?
I have urban renewal. Well, actually, 3 of us have urban renewal.
How about Wednesday, the 20th?
Good for me.
I can't do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
So I thought you wanted to do it quicker than later. You talk about February 18th? Nothing in the first week of February, for example, so we could move along?
Well, our council meeting's on the 11th.
Right.
And how about Tuesday, the 12th?
Are we talking after working hours or during?
Either one. I was assuming it'd be 5:30, but.
Okay.
Are you off on
Then I can
Fridays?
do. Then I can do.
Okay.
On which
What night were you on?
Well, let's start with
We don't know.
Wednesday, the 13th. Is that enough time?
Wednesday, the 13th at 5:30? Is that what you're saying?
Of February.
That'll be after our next council meeting, right?
Correct, 2 days after that.
Did you not want to have it before that council meeting was my question?
That's next week.
You have to give staff time.
Well, we don't know what
Yeah.
we're going to be directed to bring you, so.
I got some ideas. I'll talk to you and Angie about coming back with some information, okay? I don't, you don't think that's enough time?
I don't know.
13th?
Wednesday, the 13th. 5:30?
Fine with me.
Okay.
5:30. Well, this would be a supplemental meeting. It's not a budget meeting.
It's a work
Can we just meet in
session.
the conference room? Is it?
Workshop.
You can, it will be a public meeting.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's meet in the conference room, 5:30, Wednesday, February 13th.
We have too many people, we may need to have it in chambers. I'm sorry, I said, go ahead and tell them.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Maybe we adjourn.
Second.
Second?
Bunch of biosolids that way.